The coffee cup hit the marble floor before anyone understood what had happened. It shattered at Daniel Reed's feet, splashing dark coffee across the polished lobby. The CEO stood frozen. The chairman stared at Daniel. Then he said the one sentence that made the entire executive floor go silent. "Daniel, take her seat." Daniel looked up. "Sir, I'm the facilities supervisor. I know exactly who you are." 3 hours earlier, nobody in the building had noticed him. Daniel arrived before sunrise every morning, carrying a faded lunch bag in one hand and his 7-year-old daughter's pink backpack in the other. He was 41, a widowed father, and the supervisor of the maintenance crew at Halcyon Industries. His wife had died 4 years earlier. Since then, Daniel had learned how to braid hair badly, make pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, repair leaking pipes, and pretend everything was fine when the electricity bill arrived before payday. He wasn't ashamed of his job, but he was tired. That morning, the elevators were crowded, so Daniel took the service stairs. On the 32nd floor, he found the CEO standing outside her office. Victoria Hale was 38, brilliant, wealthy, and carrying the weight of a company that had been bleeding money for months. She glanced at the coffee tray in his hands. "You again?" Daniel stopped. "Good morning, Ms. Hale." She pointed toward her office. "Coffee. And please don't forget the sugar this time." Daniel almost corrected her. He wasn't a waiter, but he remembered his daughter's words from the night before. "Dad, don't let angry people make you angry too." So he simply nodded. "Yes, ma'am." That was how Daniel became the CEO's coffee boy. At least, that was what Victoria called him. He delivered coffee because the usual executive assistant had quit unexpectedly, and Daniel had volunteered to help until a replacement arrived. What Victoria didn't know was that Daniel had a habit of noticing things. A loose electrical panel, a strange sound inside an air conditioning unit, a delivery truck arriving at an unusual hour, and lately, something else. Employees were quietly leaving. Suppliers were complaining about late payments. Yet Victoria kept announcing expensive expansion plans. Daniel mentioned it to his manager. His manager laughed. "You fix boilers, Daniel. Let executives fix companies." Daniel let it go. Until one afternoon, his daughter became sick at school. He rushed out of the building without permission, leaving Victoria's coffee untouched on her desk. When he returned 2 hours later, he expected to be fired. Instead, Victoria was waiting. "You abandoned my meeting." Daniel swallowed. "My daughter needed me." Victoria's expression hardened. "So did I." For a moment, Daniel looked ready to argue. Then he saw the exhaustion behind her anger. "I understand," he said quietly, and walked away. That evening, Victoria discovered something unexpected. Daniel had left a note beside her coffee. Not an apology, a warning. "Your West Side supplier invoices are being paid twice." Victoria stared at the sentence. The next morning, she checked. He was right. Hundreds of thousands of dollars had disappeared through duplicate payments. But that wasn't the biggest surprise. The payments were connected to a company controlled by one of Halcyon's senior executives. Victoria began investigating quietly, and Daniel returned to work as if nothing had happened. Then came the board meeting. Victoria entered the conference room expecting an ordinary quarterly review. Instead, the chairman was already there. So were the board members. And Daniel, still wearing his gray work shirt. Victoria frowned. "Why is he here?" The chairman didn't answer immediately. He placed a folder on the table. Inside were photographs, maintenance reports, delivery records, and handwritten notes. Daniel had discovered that several critical machines were being deliberately neglected. Someone was creating failures, then paying an outside contractor to repair them. It wasn't just financial fraud. Someone was slowly damaging the company from inside. Victoria looked at Daniel. "You knew?" "I suspected." "Why didn't you tell me?" Daniel hesitated. "Because I wasn't sure you'd believe me." That answer hurt more than an accusation. Victoria lowered her eyes. For the first time, she realized how often she'd looked through people instead of at them. The chairman stood. "Victoria, you've made a serious mistake." Her face went pale. "Am I being removed?" "No." He turned toward Daniel. "You are." Daniel blinked. "Sir." The chairman slid another document across the table. The company's emergency leadership committee needed someone outside the executive circle to oversee operations while an investigation took place. Someone trusted by ordinary employees. Someone who understood how the company actually functioned from the ground up. Daniel shook his head. "I can't run a corporation." The chairman smiled faintly. You don't have to know everything. You just have to know what you don't know. Victoria stared at him. Then came the second shock. The chairman wasn't asking Daniel to replace Victoria permanently. He was asking him to take her seat for 72 hours. 3 days. Long enough to stabilize the company while the board investigated the fraud. Daniel agreed reluctantly. His first decision was simple. He reopened the employee break room. The second was even stranger. He canceled an expensive executive dinner and used the money to restore the company's emergency childcare assistance program. Victoria watched from the hallway. You really did that? Daniel looked at her. People work better when they're not terrified about what happens to their kids. Victoria had no answer. By the third day, Daniel had uncovered the final piece. The executive responsible for the fraudulent payments wasn't working alone. He had pressured Victoria into approving unrealistic expansion targets by feeding her false reports. She hadn't been evil. She had been scared. Scared that if she slowed down, everyone would see she wasn't as capable as her father had expected her to be. When the truth came out, Victoria resigned temporarily from the CEO position. Not because the board demanded it, because she finally understood that leadership wasn't about being the person with all the answers. Daniel expected never to see her again. But 2 weeks later, he found her in the company cafeteria. She was carrying 2 coffees. She placed one beside him. No sugar, she said. Daniel smiled. You remembered. Victoria sat across from him. I remembered a lot. Neither apologized. They didn't need to. Some things were better repaired quietly. Months later, Daniel returned to his old position. He still wore the same gray work shirt. Still packed lunches for his daughter. Still fixed broken doors and flickering lights. But something had changed. Employees stopped calling him the coffee boy. Not because the chairman had given him a title, because they had finally learned his name. And Victoria changed too. She rebuilt the company slowly. She listened more. She walked through the maintenance floors. She asked employees what they needed before asking what they could produce. One morning, Daniel's daughter visited the office. Victoria knelt beside her. Your dad tells me you're good at drawing. The little girl smiled. He's good at fixing things. Victoria glanced at Daniel. Yes, she said softly. He is. Daniel watched them from across the lobby. For years, he had believed strength meant carrying everything alone. His wife had taught him otherwise. Sometimes strength was accepting help. Sometimes leadership was knowing when to step aside. And sometimes the person everyone overlooks is the one who sees the truth most clearly. Daniel never became a billionaire. He never secretly owned the company. He simply became something more valuable. A man who stayed kind when life gave him every reason not to. And that was the lesson Victoria never forgot. Never measure a person's worth by the job written on their badge. The person carrying the coffee may be the one holding the whole building together.